Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, are in the world. I am the creative Contessa, and today I'm going to be taking you on a live tour of Korea, the National Museum of Daegu, which has a fantastic collection of Korean garments. So they also have a bunch of other fun artifacts. We're going to see how much we can get from we're going to see through how much we can get in our time today. So let's go. We are now on the grounds of the museum, and one of the nice things about Korean museums in general, all of them that we have visited, they have beautiful grounds. They've got beautiful gardens, they've got lovely parks, places to sit, they've got places to picnic. Schools actually come here and bring their children and their students, and this bring a bagged lunch, and they actually have a specific for them to sit outside and enjoy. The other nice thing about having these outside grounds is that they have a nice context, and we're meant to be outdoors. So for instance, we have our first is a pagoda, a Buddhist pagoda, and they were built basically as reliquaries of the Buddhist faith. So inside is something that is enshrined. And this one is from Jongdo-sa, which is a local temple in Chilgok. It was apparently built in 1031. So that's the Goryeo dynasty. That's after the fall of Shilla, for those of you who know them. Now, it was disassembled because they built a railroad. And so they took it, this was in 1905, right? And it was actually moved to Seoul originally. And now it's since been basically brought back to its homeland. Chilgok is just around the corner from Daegu. Nothing about what was actually inside of it. Let me see. No, this is fun. An examination of the depository led to the discoveries of a written account of the background to the construction of the pagoda, so they actually know why it was built, along with sarira reliquaries, a green glazed sarira bottle, and a bronze case. The written account contains information about the name of the pagoda, the states that the pagoda was built by local officials, and the states where the pagoda was built. So they actually can date this pretty precisely. So between 1019 and 1031. So yeah. Hi, Susan. Thank you for joining us. I apologize for the tardiness. We thought we had charged the phone. We did not. It was not actually apparently charging all night. So welcome to the Daegu National Museum. Today I am attired in a 17th century style mochi. You can tell that it is 17th century because the waist is around my natural waist, and the jeogori is long, right? And it's fitted in the waist, very fitted in the waist. So it's not until the end of the Joseon era that the waists come way up to here, and then the 20th century. So you can always tell early Joseon, late Joseon, mid Joseon by the waist of the chima and the fitting of the jeogori. So let's go ahead and go inside. No, I never, nope. Did not. Okay, so most museums in Korea are free. Remember, you're going to need to be closer. Yeah, most museums in Korea are free. This is among the many free museums that there are here. Okay, you're going to do the thing? Are you going to do the thing? Yeah, okay, fantastic.
Susan said she's forgotten to charge too.
Yeah. Lockers are nearly always provided for free at Korean museums. Another fantastic thing. I usually need, I need a full length one for my parasol. And I will also be putting my hat in here. It'll be harder to hide it without your satchel. Okay. So remember, if you're in Korea and have belongings with you, you can store them for free at the 680 lock. Okay, there we go. Great. Okay, in we go. Okay. Yes, to the side. When you enter, you come into this beautiful space, and Korea is very fond of digital displays, and they really especially like animating the court protocol documents that they have, the wigway that display in detail how every single ceremony was structured, how everyone was dressed, where everyone sat, where what sort of pavilions and tents were put up, what kind of decorations. And so they've done a really good job of animating these so that you can really, it comes to life, the past, in a way that everyone can appreciate from all ages. Right. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Okay. Right. Okay. And welcome to those just joining us. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up if you're enjoying. Maybe you should watch more straight on. The oblique angle's not super great. If you have any questions or you see objects that you would like us to get closer to, just let us know. Okay, now it's a blank screen. Well, let us go ahead and go into the hanbok display. So we're going to start with the historic hanbok, the historic Korean clothing, because the National Museum of Daegu actually has a pretty decently sized collection for the size of the museum. The Seoul National Museum has 0 extant hanbok actually in it, which is annoying. Yeah, it is very strange. Oh, of course, there's tons of children in here. That's okay. Hopefully they're at that end, and hopefully this end is unoccupied. Otherwise, we might go do something else while they finish. We'll see. Okay. Okay, so it's still a little loud. We might end up coming back. So when we enter the historical Korean clothing hall, they actually have hanbok from hundreds of years here. Most of what you're seeing right here, these are all 20th or 21st century. And this is a reconstruction of the royal robes, which basically stayed the same, the king's robes, which stayed the same and unchanged for about 400 years. Korean culture was classically conservative in Joseon. Right, so you can see different shapes and different lengths. You can always tell if a jeogori is later period by how short it is. Up there, that's end of Joseon. That's a court jeogori with the inserts, and I forget the name of that. There is actually a name for the inserts that are in the armpit that way, like on mine too. But because that's right at the breast level, like almost armpit level, that is extremely late Joseon, the end of the court period. And then if you see the sleeves, the swallow, what do we call those? The bagpipe sleeves, I don't know. The bagpipe sleeves, that's a fashion from the 70s basically. So that's a very, and that's still, they still look like this in North Korea. They never got past this basically. So you can always tell, the age or the period of a jeogori by the shape of the sleeves, how long it is in the body, whether it's open on the sides. We've got some norige, those are the decorative hangers, basically the only kind of jewelry other than the headpieces that women wore in Joseon later and mid. Ring, yes, I guess I never think of rings, but they're always made of jade. They're never particularly ornate. You can see children's shoes, and then those are women's shoes, the embroidered ones. Those are reproductions. Those are not original, but I have seen pairs like that more or less dated to the 15th century, actually extant pairs. Unfortunately, I was not doing this live streaming thing when they had a historical shoe exhibit here, which was amazing. I'm so sorry I didn't get to take you guys to that. Okay, so here we come to, these are reproductions. These are not originals. And this is court clothing specifically. So we actually have a mixture of periods here as well. So I'll point out the various periods. So the earliest thing we have displayed here, the earliest 2 things we have displayed are the soldier here. So this is a 15th century style Joseon soldier. And I know many of you are thinking that's what soldiers were. Yeah, they had better uniforms. What can we say? So you can see the layers here, and this is all silk, right? All of this is silk. You've got at least 3 layers. You can't actually see his under jeogori, which would be made of white and possibly actually rami or cotton. And then you've got You've got his robe, his dalryeong over top of that, and then over top of that, a keja, basically. And then there's a couple of sashes and a couple of belts, and of course, various ceremonial pieces. Soldiers always have peacock feathers. Soldiers don't always have peacock feathers. The upper ranking soldiers have peacock feathers. So we're talking officers, generals, that kind of thing, because a peacock is a very exotic bird in the Joseon dynasty, right? Did I say, what did I say?
I said I need.
Oh, you need peacock feathers, you do, but you also need a soldier's outfit if you're going to wear that. Okay, so if you look on his arm, that cuff there, that is not decorative. That is actually an archery bracer. That is, and it does two things. It's an archery bracer, but if you look closely, you can see leopards, quadrupeds. Quadrupeds are a rank badge for upper level officers in Joseon. So courtiers, their rank badges were actually birds, right? And then of course the king gets a dragon and the queen gets a phoenix, but soldiers get quadrupeds. So if you see a rank badge that is quadrupedal, then that is a rank badge for a soldier. And yeah, talk about a beautiful bracer. We had no such beautiful bracers for archers in medieval Europe. They definitely had it superior here. Now, that particular style dates, as far as I know, to the 19th century, and I don't know if we have earlier archery bracers or not, but they've put it on this 15th century style Joseon soldier. The hat is felted, wool, and there's a whole special artisanal classification for people who still make, there's not many who still make this hat in the historical style, actually. And then, of course, the beads that are suspended from the hat may or may not have been suspended from the hat. They might have been suspended from the mangyeon, which is the band they wear around their heads. But, you know, the beads are another form of bling, so they can indicate, you know, wealth or status depending on the quality of your beads. Okay, yes. Oh yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. This is live. It's absolutely live, at least you might be watching this as a recording, but right now we're live. Right now we're live. Okay, so let's move on. No. We're going to move on to the ladies because I'm trying to keep it same period. Okay, so over here, the queen. Well, she's wearing what we're pretty certain is a replica of a queen's garments. So this is 16th century Joseon. And you can tell that by many things. One, the massively oversized garments, the extremely voluminous skirts, which pull on the ground. They are longer than she is, right? And that's on purpose. She obviously is not going to be going outside in this skirt very often. She's going to be walking around a space that's kept immaculately clean. And you can see that there's a ornamentation, the ornamental band, the dual ornamental bands around the center of the skirt and the bottom of the skirt. That is gold screening. That is a technique that they still practice to this day, and it hasn't really changed, but that's gold leaf, real gold leaf. It is not woven in, at least those ones are not. It is stamped on. And her jeogori, her what we might call an overcoat, you can tell that it's extremely voluminous. The sleeves go well past her hands. They're extremely wide, but you can tell that it's also got multiple layers. So this is a garment, this particular garment was definitely intended to help her stay warm. And if you come over to, trying to see if you can see from which side, it's probably easier to see from this side. You can see that it's actually slit up to her waist. And this would allow, there's a slit on both sides up to about her waist, her actual waist. And this skirt goes around her waist. It is not a high-waisted skirt. And that slit would actually allow her to sit comfortably. Now, I saw some fashion historian claimed that, oh, the slit must mean that it's ceremonial. Bullshit. If you wear these clothes, you will understand that having a slit that goes up to your waist makes it much easier to sit on the floor, which is how you're sitting in Joseon in the 16th century. Very few people are sitting in chairs. It's floor seating. Beautiful silk cushions on the floor, but still. They actually have a replica of this. They have the original and a replica similar to this on the other side on display, and they've displayed how they made the fabric, in fact. So we'll look at that later. Other details that make this early Joseon. So you can kind of tell that it's geometric construction, right? You can see the seam along her, that's kind of at her upper arm, shoulder level, that's cutting across her arm. That's the indication that this is just rectangles and triangles, basically. And it's got a particularly thick, particularly broad and thick collar that goes right up to her chin, and it does scrunch down, and it's supposed to scrunch down. And that's another sign of a much earlier period of clothing, that Koryo, that's the style of the colors in Koryo, seems to be the styles in Shilla and also in early Joseon. Another thing that indicates that this is early Joseon is the wig. Okay, now, yes, you might think they always like to depict these women in Joseon with having thick braids that trail on the ground. It's unlikely that most women had that much hair. And we do have extant examples of wigs from this era that look just like this, like what she's wearing. So that confection of braids over the front of the head, and then coming to this massive bun in the back, massive bun of braids with ornaments all throughout, that is very clearly an early Joseon. So we're talking 15th, 16th, 17th century. Right. So then we come here to this lady here. She's also early Joseon, 16th, possibly 17th century. She is wearing a dangot, this overcoat. This was literally meant for keeping you warm when you went outside. It is unlikely she would have worn this inside, because hopefully the ondo floor heating in her mansion would have been comfortable enough to mean she didn't need a dangot. This, though, for those of you who watched K-dramas, this overcoat is the thing that becomes the quote-unquote veil that the girls are always wearing. They put it over their, I should have brought one. They put it over their head, and then they're out running around like this. And you see them also in some Joseon era art depicting women who are out and about. That is actually this coat. And the part that you see framing their faces is the collar. And if you look closely, you'll see, and even in the K-dramas, you'll see the sleeves draped across their back. That was in fact a practice. They basically seem to have stopped wearing the dangot as a coat somewhere in the 18th century, and they just became purely a kind of veil that women could wear when they went out and about. And again, you can tell it's early Joseon, massive sleeves that go way beyond the hands, and that's on purpose. And you can actually see the proper width of fabric that they were dealing with in Joseon, because you can see the seam on the top of her shoulder and then the seam in mid-sleeve. Right, so we're talking, that's like 15 to 20 inches, probably 15 inches wide. So, not very wide, but what that means is that you have to do extreme levels of geometric construction to create width. So I want you to imagine that width of fabric combined, how many seams you would have to put in to create a skirt this wide. It would be an extreme number of seams. Right, the hem on this, I think I remember reading, is like 15 meters or something like that. It's a massive skirt, and it is pleated into a band. So yeah, if you're there watching, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please do pop your questions in the comments if you have any, and I will absolutely answer them. If, however, we don't manage to actually get to the question, or I miss it somehow, once the video publishes, if you post it under the published video, I always read those comments and I will respond. I promise. Okay, so here we are, back to our clothing. Yes.
Do we have to do anything special to make sure I'm seeing all of it from different places?
I don't know. It's creative Contessa. I don't know why it's. Yeah, if Susan, if you could just leave a comment, because we haven't seen a comment in a long time, and we're trying to figure out why we haven't seen any comments. That would be annoying if the comments just aren't coming through. I don't know. Okay, right. So also that means if you have posted a comment and we haven't responded, it's because it hasn't shown up yet. Welcome to the world of live streaming.
Is the queen wearing jewels?
Is the queen wearing jewels? The only jewels that the queen is wearing are in her hair, in the front, and unfortunately I can't show you the back, but when we get to the hair ornament section, I'll show you the kinds of things she is wearing in the back.
You can see some.
Yeah. So but this is late Joseon. That's late Joseon. So that's not a good example of early Joseon.
Fine.
Right. Okay, so let's look at this young man. So
Thank you, Susan, again.
yeah, appreciate you posting a comment to check for us, Susan. Thank you. Right, so here we have a young man, and that is probably the crown prince. He's got jade sewn into his headdress, and this kind of headdress, as cool as it is, only worn by young noble boys, whether they're crown prince or just noblemen's sons. you know, that's just the way it was. But still, he has some pretty cool layers. So once again, the layered effect is everything. And what you can't see is, of course, he's wearing paji, a pair of pants made out of cotton or rami or silk. He's wearing bosot, which are these kind of sock-like things, and we'll get to those, show you those later. And then he's wearing a robe that comes down to actually mid-calf, and then he's got a keita over top of that, the overrobe. Now, you see those are all gold stamping all over that, and all of those symbols mean something. There is almost nothing in Joseon that is just decorative. It all has meaning. So first off, the Chinese characters are the characters for prosperity, for good luck, for long life. And then we've also got, actually, what you might mistake some of these for characters, but they're not. On the top, in the center of the prince's overrobe, you will see the overrobe, right? The very top two symbols going down the front, those are bats, and bats are historically a symbol of good luck in Korea. So are butterflies. If you see butterflies on things, symbol of good luck.
That's an interesting question.
Yes.
Joseph asks, is the queen and the concubine were in the same dresses?
No. No. Queens and concubines would definitely not have worn the same dresses. Even officially recognized, let me modify that statement. Okay, so if the concubine's son becomes the king, then she gets to become the queen mother, and then she gets to wear the full royal robes. But no, concubines and queens definitely did not wear the same thing. And the queen would have had rank badges on her official garments. The concubines would not. No rank for them, unless they actually had rank. If the concubine were a woman of rank, but often concubines were actually chosen from the palace, the court ladies, who were actually came from lower classes. So yeah, I'm not talking, you know, slaves or anything like that, but often they didn't have rank, and that was on purpose. You don't want to have concubines who have parents, families of rank, competing with the queen, who definitely has a family of rank. That's a recipe for literal civil war. Yeah, good question.
Boys' clothes are adorable.
Yeah, the boys' clothes are adorable. So I want to look at his headdress, right? So you'll see on the side here, you can actually see that is a phoenix. And of course, the phoenix is everywhere. It is a symbol for resurrection and eternal life. And of course, it's a heavenly creature, right? It's like a dragon. It's a heavenly creature. And so it is stamped on the crown prince's headdress, not because it's beautiful, but because it symbolizes his royal status, right? And the fact that he is close to the heavens, et cetera, et cetera. You know, God's representative on earth and all of that. Okay, so let us move on then, coming to our gentleman here. So this is an aristocrat. He's a nobleman, and this is definitely 15th, 16th, early 17th century Joseon. The top layer there, that is mochi in Korean. That is rami, nettle cloth. And you can actually see it's transparent, it's translucent. I am also wearing, what I'm wearing today, today's hanbok, is also rami. But it is nowhere near as fine as what he is wearing. And that's because modern rami is made in China and doesn't have anything like the quality of the historical stuff that was handwoven, which basically you could still get in Korea up until the 60s. Yes.
So, the guy I worked with, his mother made him his rami. She was actually still making the rami metal clothing for him, for his.
When?
God, he's what, 60? So when he was a kid.
Right.
So
Yeah.
50 years ago.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, up until 50 years ago, you could still people were still making clothing out of the fine hand-spun, hand-woven rami, but those days are done. Anyway, he's wearing a dalryeong, and dalryeong, as they're called, as you should pronounce all those letter combinations correctly. And it's got these massive sleeves, right? And that is just over top of, this is his at-home attire. This is not court attire. He would not go to court dressed like this. He would go to court dressed like the gentleman behind him, who looks exactly like him, just in different clothes. It's the same guy, yeah. So you can see the difference between court clothing, the court uniform up there on the left, which changed almost not even the littlest bit for 400 years. And then the fashion garments, which are here on the right, which did change. The sleeve size changed, the fullness of the sleeves. And again, you can tell this is early Joseon because once again, we have crazy full sleeves. And we even have even the robe itself is pretty full. And you've got that U neckline, that neckline came from came actually from the Tang Dynasty originally, and then it just kind of stuck around eventually. I think it was during the not Tang Dynasty, sorry, Yuan Dynasty. Yeah, and the reason that clothing goes from being, and we'll do a comparison between these two queens basically. So you've got queen, 16th century queen, and you've got late 19th century queen. And the reason that you have such a difference in the voluminous nature of the skirts is because this is pre-Imjin War. Before the Imjin War, Joseon was actually a pretty wealthy country. They had access to luxurious amounts of fabric. It was much more plentiful. After the Imjin War, they were poor. Yes. After the Imjin War, they were poor, relatively speaking. And so the amount of fabric that went into making clothing dropped drastically, even amongst the noble classes. So that's why you have this slimming down of everything. Sleeves become shorter, sleeves become more narrow. Jeogori gets shorter, skirts become much shorter. They actually go to the ground and they don't drag on the ground anymore. Right? What?
You're so pale. Focus.
Sorry. Right. Okay. So over here, back to our gentleman, right? So the other reason you can tell that this is early Joseon, that both of them are in fact, is the collars that go right up to the jawline and even compress a little bit because they're so tall. Now he's wearing that belt. That is of the same style as the court belts, but the aristocratic men, the yangban as they were called, they wore these even in their leisure time as a sign of their rank. They are not at all effective, and they have one on display that you'll get to see. It's a silly belt. I don't understand. No one's been able to explain to me why these belts. But the stones that are on them are obviously a value. It's, again, this is male bling. This is how the men blinged out in Joseon, was these belts. It was almost the only way they could do it.
Question: when was the Imjin War?
The Imjin War was in the 1590s. And yeah, Susan, thank you for asking. The Imjin War was in the 1590s, and basically Japan wanted to invade China via Joseon. They wanted to invade Ming via Joseon, and Joseon said no. No. And they even promised, they super pinky promised that they wouldn't raid, they wouldn't pillage, they wouldn't plunder, they wouldn't burn, they wouldn't sexually assault. Like, they did all the things. And Joseon still said, we don't believe you. So the Japanese did invade. They burnt a lot of things to the ground. They did pillage a lot, but eventually they were forced back and they never made it to China. So, it was part of, I think it was who was the shogun in the 1590s? The shogun, I forget which one it was. The shogun in the 1590s, he was trying to, if you can remember who the shogun was in the 1590s, damn it, starts with a T. I think I'm pretty. Yeah, Tokugawa. I think it was Tokugawa, right? I think it was Tokugawa. Don't quote me on that. Japanese history is not my specialty. I only kind of peripherally aware of it as it relates to Korea. Anyway, the shogun wanted, of course, to cement his power and expand his power base by going and kicking China's ass. So,
warriors stopped it.
Yeah, they thought it would be a good idea. It was warriors dressed like this who stopped him. Specifically, the Navy actually is what brought it to an end. It was Admiral Yi and his fleet that trounced them and made them turn around and finally go home. Okay, so over here we have, as I've mentioned, the queen, the late Joseon court lady. And actually, I'm trying to see what her rank badge is. She's got a dragon, so I'm pretty certain she's a queen or a princess. Right, so this is late Joseon. The headdress, that very fancy headdress, something happened in late Joseon where they started developing all these extremely ornate and complex headpieces that you would think would date to earlier, but they just don't. They don't seem to. We have no evidence of it. Same thing with these hats, like the princess's hat, that's 19th century. That is not a very old style of hat. It looks like it should be something from 600 years ago. It's not. Yeah. Questions?
No, somebody asked, war with the turtle boat. Yes,
Yes.
That. Cat will be cat. Yeah, no, your comments aren't blocked, but if you wrote anything before few, I did not see it. And it's not showing up in my feed.
Interesting.
But welcome back.
Welcome back, cats. It's lovely to have you back with us today. Okay, so let's just do a sweep. Are there any of these ensembles that anyone would like me to review or discuss again before we move on to some of the other pieces that they have, hanbok pieces in this museum? Because we're going to get to some of the extant ones, because these are all reproductions, I want to be clear, but these are reproductions based on extant finds and or art, the historical record, right? Artistic or documentary. Mostly though grave finds. There are a lot. Yeah, this is so late, Joseon. It's not even funny. The second you see sleeves, okay, people, let me help you identify eras of Korean clothing. When you see sleeves with that multi-stripe thing, that's early 20th century Joseon practically, or later. That is not medieval in the slightest. Sorry. Yeah.
I love how they put
Yeah, the little, yeah, just to make, that's for the toddlers who are done. I don't know if y'all can see the cute little crowned cutesy Peroro style thing. I'm pretty certain that's there for the toddlers who are literally at this eye level. It gives them something to look at. It's cute. That's clever, Korea. Well done. Okay, let's go over to the king's robe. That's the reproduction of the king's robe, because many of you weren't here for that yet, I don't think. I can discuss some things about this. So that belt, that crazy belt that we saw on the nobleman in his two forms, in his home casual and not home.
Yes, I believe that is a Hwarong uniform.
Yes, yes.
And for those people that are having problems commenting, Cat will be Cat made a good thing about going back and clearing data and cache into something able to.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for Kat for sharing that. So if you're having problems commenting, go back and clear your data and cache on your browser or your app, and then double tap the screen. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay.
Very familiar with the Hwarong.
Yes. So the Hwarong, the Knights of the Flower, right? The Flower Knights, as they were called. Okay, so here we are at the King's Robe. And there's a couple of interesting features here. This is based on an extant one from the end of the 19th century, but the shape does not seem to have changed from the earlier ones that have survived in parts or in whole, right? So you can see under the armpits, there are actually ties. Those ties are for that belt, that annoying belt that otherwise, how on earth is it going to stay? So they didn't have belt loops, but they had belt ties. And you see that on the civilian garments as well, when you that need to suspend those belts. They have these ties.
Made of a different color piece.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Damn it, kings. Why aren't they a different color? Why are they in the same glorious silk brocade? Now, the fabric, this is a silk brocade. And woven into it, again, are Chinese characters for prosperity and longevity, and symbols of prosperity and longevity. And I don't know if you can see, but there are also clouds woven everywhere. And of course, clouds are a symbol of heaven. And that's not an accidental illusion, in case you're wondering.
Sadly, from our viewpoint, it's glorious. I'm not sure that our feed can show it well enough.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've got this glass in front of us. I don't know why. They don't want us touching these things. It's weird.
It's the Contessa would.
Because I would. They know me. Right. Okay. So the rank badges. So the rank badges of royalty are circular. First off, of bureaucrats, they're square. So you can tell it's a royal rank badge when it is circular. And this is gold, topside couched gold work. And that is a dragon. And that is the royal dragon. That is the king's dragon. The dragon is the king, right? That is the symbolism there. And again, you can see the width at which this fabric is woven. It was woven to be slightly wider. You can see on the sleeve here from sort of just the past the shoulder seam to the cuff. That is basically the width of the fabric.
In the picture, it kind of looks like the fold right there.
Yeah, that's not a fold. That's a seam. And we've got some interesting connection details here for my fashion people. The sashes, you'll notice there's actually multiple sashes. That's a late Joseon thing. That's not an earlier Joseon thing to have multiple ties in the same spot. And let me tell you that it's beautiful, but it's annoying to tie those things. I have a tangi, which is the tangi is this green thing, the long with the swallowtail front. That's called a tangi in Korean. I have one of those, and it's got the double ties like that, and it's irritating to get them to all cooperate together. Anyway, first world problems, absolutely Contessa world problems. Yeah. So you have these rank badges are on front, back, and both shoulders. And of course, they're embroidered separately, and then they're appliqued on. So it's not embroidered directly onto the garment, and that makes total sense because when the garment wears out, you can just remove the rank badges and put them on the next one. Yes,
King Sejong
King Sejong. What about him?
is the Joseon dynasty or King Sejong.
Yes. Joseon dynasty actually starts at the end of the 14th century with Taejo, King Taejo, the founder of the dynasty of the Yi clan of Jeonju, is a general who leads a revolt. Let me see, what do we call it if it's successful? Leads a freedom fight against the last king of the Goryeo dynasty and wins and establishes therefore the Joseon dynasty. And Sejong is like his grandson or his great grandson. I think his grandson. Don't hold me to that though. Great grandson or great grandson. If you know, put it in the comments. I think it's grandson though. Yeah, Sejong the Great is for me, actually, there's two high points in the Joseon dynasty. Sejong the Great is one of them, which is unfortunate for the Joseon dynasty because it comes real early. The second one is Jojong, who's at the end of the 18th century. He's the second great Renaissance king, but otherwise, Joseon has a lot of not great times, honestly. And it just gets worse and worse for women as time goes on. Okay, are there questions about the king's royal robe? Now, this is not what he would wear. If the king left to go out and about, he would not wear this. He would have riding clothes, which would also have rank badges and stuff on them, but it wouldn't. This is his court clothing. This is what he wore in official sessions with his people. He had different attire for, being sort of a normal day-to-day king instead of court king. Okay. Yes. I'm kind of confused of how some Ming Dynasty variations of the Viet Thuc Vietnamese robe look more Qing Dynasty than Ming Dynasty. So when is the Vietnamese robe dates to, when does that date to? Because you have the Ming Dynasty, and then the Qing Dynasty comes afterwards. And of course, Vietnam in that era, and I forget what the kingdoms were called back then. They weren't called Vietnam. Were client states of Qing and Ming, and also I think Yuan and Tang and Song, from what I understand from my travels down there. Okay, so this robe here, this magnificent, while I wait for Kat to answer, I'll go ahead and talk about this magnificent yellow robe. This is from the brief Korean Empire, and empire is such a strong word because empire implies taking over other people's lands, whereas Korea pretty quickly got taken over. But the king, Gojong declared the Korean Empire, and he decided that like the emperors of China, the robes would therefore be yellow. So if you ever see depictions of a Korean king or a Korean king in quotes in a yellow robe, it's from the imperial period. So this is 20th century, practically early 20th century, late 19th, early 20th century. So, but again, you can see just how conservative the shape is, practically the same as the Joseon king's robes. Not very much different.
Looks exactly the same.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So these some of these are all reproductions or ones that were made in the last part of the century. So here we'll come here. So this gives you an idea of the undergarments. Yeah. So this is a man's jeogori. The big white garment, that is mochi again. That's rami, nettle cloth, and this is undergarments, right? This would be worn right against the skin. This is the layer that can be actually laundered. To launder it, often they would actually take off the white strip around the neckline, and that actually gets replaced too because that gets really nasty. And then this is actually this white robe down there. This could actually be mourning garments, but also Joseon was known as the land of the white people because most people didn't wear dyed clothing. But that's a jeogori. That's a man's undergarment right there. That's a later one. This is a 20th century style one, but the only difference between that and the earlier ones is that there was no curve in the sleeve. That was just a straight sleeve instead of that curve that dips down that way. Okay, let's move on to some bling before we get to the reconstructions. Okay, so these are what you see here. I'm going to ask the viewer, do you think a man or a woman would have worn these beautiful pieces? And while you come up with an answer, I'm going to tell you about them. So these are belts. These are all belts, and or hanging, yeah, or things that you hang from your belt, right?
Just those two are belt hangs. Everything else.
Yes, everything else is a belt. Yeah, we've got you can see everything bunched up with all the cording. So these go around the waist of the garment. And then, this is an acceptable style of bling in Joseon. The thing you have to remember about Joseon is it's Neo-Confucian, right? Which means it's modesty. It's all about not being overly sumptuous, not being, showing too much bling, being modest and humble. So in order to show non-humility, they had to come up with clever ways of doing it, right? That meant that nothing could be too big and too loud. Another reason that garments got more narrow in their cut, no doubt.
Clothes for both.
Yeah, nope, just men. These are for men. It's only men who wore cords like this, based on the records. And these are made of silk, right? These ones are all ones that were actually worn. None of these are reproductions. Number 2, which is this one, this middle one here, the middle one, the red one, that is late Joseon, so that's probably early 19th century. The other ones are all, and number 3 is also late Joseon, so that's the yellow one over here.
Which has got a really pretty
right. Number 1, which is the blue one, is 20th century. But yeah, you can see the norige, the hangers, the pendant hangers there. This is a technique you can actually come to Korea. I can touch the glass. My children have literally licked this. Maybe it means I shouldn't touch it. Maybe I shouldn't touch the glass. Yeah, this is for men, and they would wrap them around their waist. And in later Joseon, that was much higher. But the garments were full enough that would help the corded tassels stay up, the tassel cords stay high up, right? As the Joseon era moves on, for men and women, the waists kind of gradually come up. That's just the aesthetic. So you can actually learn to make these tassels at workshops here in Korea. The cords, these could be woven, they could also be finger loop braided, because that seems to be a technique they definitely had here. Questions? No? Okay, brilliant. Okay. Not just, I think it's also, no, they've changed the exhibit a little bit. Okay. Nope, there's also male bling here. Okay, yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, but we're going to focus for now on the bling for the ladies. So in this kind of scary looking wheel of doom, it does look like torture devices. No, those are binya, as they're called in Korean. They are hairpins, and they all date. They unfortunately haven't put them in any kind of order. So number 1 is the oldest extant one that they have in this collection. And you can actually, it really allows you to see the change in style over time, because number 1 is 16th century and early 16th century, the very top. So that is a 16th century piece. The gems it had gems originally. They have obviously been pried out and probably sold on or something like that. That happens in Europe too. But you'll notice that it actually has a flat blade for the part that goes into the bun. And it's not very long. It's not so long that you could kill someone easily with it. You'd have to work a little harder to assassinate someone with that. But what's interesting about that is I'm pretty certain that flat blade would be much better at staying in your hair than the round one, which will just slip right out, as we know. Right. Yeah. So like number 2. Female, exactly. Should be, yet. Oh, 25. Where's 25? That's even earlier. I missed that somehow.
25?
25.
Oh, that's the earrings.
Oh, okay. Come back to the hairpins. Sorry. I'm focusing on the hair stuff. Everything else in this case is late Joseon or 20th century, even like post Joseon. But number 9, so we've got a couple of hair parting tools here, which is an interesting idea. So number 9 and number 6, for instance, are examples of hair parting tools.
Number 6.
And I therefore think number 11 and number 13. Yeah. Number 11 and 13. So those kind of smaller ones, those are not hairpins. Those are for dressing your hair. That also kind of indicates the kind of thickness of hair we're dealing with if you need a hair parting tool like that. My hair is so thin that you could use a flat, not sharp embroidery needle this long to part it and you'd probably be fine. But apparently these ladies have a much longer, a much longer set of a much more thick and voluminous and voluptuous hair than I do. Still, I just love that tools for daily, you can see part of the process of styling hair here, right? It's not just what goes into the hair, and even the hair styling tools are beautiful, right?
Getting glare from the.
Oh, maybe change the angle. Change the angle.
I suppose if I just stand.
Yeah, if you stand in front of it and block it. Also, the motifs on all of these, nearly all of them are symbolic, right? I mean, the plain one, not so much, but the ones that actually have ornamentals are auspicious creatures like butterflies or chrysanthemums. There's even a peacock or a phoenix. Even three is a phoenix, right?
Or the number of
Phoenix, yeah.
equal to a ring.
Number of pins.
How many hairpins would you, if you?
Oh no.
Because we saw on the clean one.
Right.
Like
so we haven't gotten to the ornaments yet. We'll get to these hair ornaments here. Yeah. So it seems that I can't answer that question. I haven't been able to find that information. It seems that the general style is to have three because of the sort of triangle that the wig makes, right? So those are the pieces in the center are wig ornaments, or well, hair ornaments, I guess you could call them, but they often end up in the wigs. The number 19, the biggest of them, is actually called a hairpin because the pieces that's flexible, those are actually coiled metal springs there. And so when you walk, they would actually flutter. Hence, they're covered by butterflies. For instance, that's very late. That style is particularly late. They don't even bother to give it a date, which tells me just how late it is. So questions about any of these hair pieces. Now the binya would go, that's specifically for a bun, right? And so remember that in Joseon, married women put their hair in a bun, either put their hair, wrap their hair around their heads, put it up. Or especially later Joseon, when that style went away, later Joseon, they put their hair in a bun in the back of their head. And then this binya is a sign of being a married woman, right? Not so much a wedding ring, but the binya is a sign of a married woman in that era. I don't know about Koryo, and I don't know when that became the symbol, so I'm not certain when that transition happened, because I don't think it had always been married women had their hair up like that. But at some point, that transition happened. Right? Don't forget to keep your heels together. Okay, so number 25. These, I'm going to assume, what do you all think these are in this circle here? These pieces, what would you identify them as? So these
big hairpin are for royalty. Not necessarily.
I mean, the big hairpin is for someone with money, not necessarily for royalty. The part that would make it royalty, question, yeah. So if we go back to the hairpins, actually. So it's not necessarily a question of size when it comes to royalty. It's down to the symbolism that's on it, the images, the pieces, what are they made of, how much jade is on it, does it have a phoenix? Like if it's got a phoenix, it's royalty. Yeah, or if it's got a dragon, it's royalty, right? Otherwise, there doesn't seem to have been, the pieces don't seem to have regulated quite that tightly, right? Although certain animals were definitely reserved.
Cat guessed earrings.
They are earrings, but they're not earrings like you may think of them. They don't go on your ears. They don't go from your earlobes. They're not for pierced ears. They actually are suspended somewhere about the ears, either from a coronet or maybe from ribbons wrapped around ears. We don't know because we have no depictions of them being worn per se, but they're always found roughly near the place where your ears would be. That being said, there's no way to affix them to their ears. It's no piercing or anything like that, right? So yeah, they're ornaments that go somewhere near your ears, but they're not like modern earrings, and men and women absolutely wore them. Those are gold, and those date to the Three Kingdoms period, so like 1st through 6th century AD. They're very old. Aren't they beautiful though? If you want to look at these in more detail, check out my Gyeongju tours. We explore some of those in the Daegu National Museum. Okay, and here we have more bling. Now this bling, this is all male bling. This is all male bling. Everything that you see on this circle here is for men and men only, not for women. It's nice to know that men were able to bling out as well. It is nearly all, so we've got some mid-Joseon and we've got some late Joseon and we've got some 20th century. I would say the earliest stuff is 30 is mid-Joseon, so probably 18th century. 33 and 34, those those are finials for a men's hat, right? So those are really gorgeous. Those are jade, by the way. That is carved jade on gold. So yeah, some other bling options for men's. And then 32 is also Joseon Dynasty. That's a strap of agate beads. So you might be looking at these and thinking necklace, but you would be wrong. These would actually go on the hat. So let's pop over briefly to our soldiers so I can show you where they would go. And I think we do have a got exhibit that shows men's their horsehair hats, but just for now I'm going to pop over here. So these beads here, where you see them hanging from his hat, that is where those beads would be suspended from. So they are vaguely in the neck area, but they are not anchored by the neck.
Does kind of look like the pasta noodle thing from kindergarten.
It does. It's just the very most expensivest version of that you can imagine, because these are made of jade. These are made of agate. They're made of various precious materials. It's also why they've lasted so long.
More expensive than macaroni.
2027, interestingly, that is tortoise shell.
This one right in the middle.
Yeah, the one that probably barely shows up against that background. Yeah, so we also have rock crystal. We some very expensive pieces here.
Hand fans, are they different for different classes?
No, it doesn't seem that lower classes had hand fans actually. Okay, so and by lower classes I mean like the slave class, so probably because they didn't have time to fan themselves. So here we have what are called norige, and that word just means pendant. So it doesn't necessarily mean only this kind of pendant. It can be anything that's a pendant. And those are for ladies. These are ladies' norige. And all of these are extant, but they're all except for 12 are 20th century. So number 12 is Joseon Dynasty. Oh, right. Sorry. All the norige are modern. So for those of you looking for historical stuff, we're going to ignore those. Norige are actually a late invention anyway, or a late innovation. Yeah. But these are all kinds of beads and ornaments that they just kind of found through excavations. And, they're not certain if they were part of a wreath of beads like the ones you see on the men's gatkun. That's what I'm looking for. Gatkun. The hat beads. Okay. There doesn't seem to be, so I have never found any kind of hand fan communication rules or bits of etiquette in Korea. I don't know it. I haven't found any evidence of it. Let me put it that way. Yeah, the blue norige is quite beautiful. So these hair ribbons that you see here, these are ceremonial, and these are late Joseon. So if you see these kinds, exactly. These are hair ribbons. These
stand in front of for scale.
These are hair ribbons, right? So they get pinned into your hair, and it's ceremonial only. You would not wear this in a day-to-day basis. This is specifically a bridal. These are all bridal, basically, but ceremonial or bridal, but this red one especially is bridal. And it used to be that only queens could wear that, but then eventually they relaxed the rules so that normal women could wear them as well, but only on their wedding day. But this is definitely late Joseon, not particularly. This does not date back very far, which is part of what I was saying about this really ornamental, heavily, what's the word? I'm not ornamental, heavily decorated, heavily ornamented. That's what I'm looking for. Heavily ornamented accessories and headdresses are a late Joseon development. And I feel like that could be pressure, an attempt to distinguish themselves more, and to resist the rising imperial pressures that are increasing through the 19th century. Oh, the jade decorations, yeah. Those would normally, so those are jade decorations that would get sewn onto these hair ribbons.
Oh.
Yeah, Joseon Dynasty. These are the earliest thing in this case. Yeah. So let's get to the waist, to different kinds. We talked about the men a little bit, and let's talk more about the men and women, actually. So we have actually some pretty early pieces here. For those of you who are doing a Korea era impression, we actually have some good news for you. Here, look at these beautiful placard belts. So right here, those placards, for those of you who do 15th, 14th century European impressions, you might recognize these placards. It seems to have been a style that sprang up interestingly across the world at about the same time. Keep your heels together. At about the same time. Now, these placards would have been mounted to fabric, right? So, point at the placards, please. Not on me. Thank you. The placards would have been mounted to fabric.
Cameraman likes to look at you.
Yeah, I know, but other people are interested in the objects. Right. So they would have been mounted to leather or for the upper, especially for the noble classes, silk brocade, probably. Yeah. One of them maybe. Let me see what the reconstruction is here. No, yeah. So these, yes, maybe, but these are reconstructions. So these are hypothetical reconstructions, 12 and 13, the two here. Those are hypothetical reconstructions of Sheila era clothing, of Sheila era belts for men, ceremonial belts. Maybe ceremonial or maybe fashion. It's sort of hard to tell. All that survives, or the precious stone bits, the fabric and the leather almost never ever survive. So these are what I would call conjectural reconstructions. But this is what they find from the ground. So those are Sheila and Three Kingdoms era, so first millennium. This is Koryo, so it says specifically 14th century, which is unusual. They usually don't tell you that much detail, which is nice. But you can always tell Koryo because it's ornate. Right, Koryo, that was before, there was still Buddha society. Ornate is just fine. Buddha accepts ornamental clothing apparently better than Confucius did, I guess. I don't know, I'm just making it up. But it's interesting that in the Koryo dynasty, they have this really blingy bling with these intricate designs, very flashy. And then in the Joseon, they go blah, sadly, in a lot of cases, minimalist and all that. Right. So here we have some more examples of the kind of ornaments that you could have in Koryo in the 14th century. Those are lychee designs. Yeah, I know it's a little hard to see. Now, they're not certain. They just found those in the ground. They don't know how it would have been applied to clothing or if it was applied to clothing, but, you know, that is an original celadon bowl, for those of you who are into pottery, that dates to the 14th century, and it has that inlaid lychee design, which is the same as the little bezants kind of below it. Right. So number 14 here in this big circle is a Sheila. I'm pretty certain that's Sheila era. Yeah, that's Sheila. That is from the Three Kingdoms period even. Again, the only thing that survives is the metal bits. The belt itself did not, unfortunately. Yeah. And they know it's a belt because it was found around where the waist of the skeleton would have been if the skeleton had also not dissolved into nothing. Okay, so down here we have some very late Joseon pieces, the ladies' pieces specifically, 7, 8, and 8, and 8 are kind of both of those. Bottom on 8 are the same thing. These are actually what are called baby's first birthday breast ties, and that's 20th century. It kind of underscores what I was saying about things getting really ornate at the end of the Joseon dynasty or even into the early 20th century when it's no longer even Joseon. Trying to find 6. Oh, right, it's over there. Okay. Yeah, we have more waist cords, but we also have a flat waistband, which dates to mid-Joseon. And that's an extant piece. So you can actually see there's like sweat stains on it. There's use of wear and tear, which I always find personally fascinating. It is silk. It is a woven band, and I unfortunately cannot read the Korean well enough to tell you whether it's tablet woven or some other, or rigid heddle or what other kind of technique it might be. But you have an alternative option, a more solid option in mid-Joseon for creating a waist on a man than you do with later Joseon when the cords are kind of what you got. Okay, questions about the belt wear? Yeah. If you do Koryo, 14th, the sort of first millennium to 11th through 14th century, you have some really nice ornate options. If you get into Joseon, things get much plainer. Okay. So ceremonial dress. This is 20th century, not even late Joseon. The style is kind of late Joseon, but the ornamental nature of this is a wedding dress. This is a true, honest Korean bridal robe. And this.
Questions from us.
Oh yes, sorry.
Were the Sheila belt pieces gold and silver?
Yes. So the Sheila, let's go back to the Sheila belt pieces. Yes. So these Sheila pieces here, these are silver. And I don't know, let me see if it actually tells me what kind of, it just says silver. So I don't know if it's an alloy or to what degree it's an alloy. But yeah, these are silver. Obviously, this is from someone of a lower rank because the higher ranking people had gold.
You want to see that? Go look.
Yeah, and if you want to see that, go look at our Gyeongju tours. Good question. Right. Okay, so here we are at the wedding robe. This is a 20th century traditional wedding robe, but it harkens back to the wonsam, the historical garment that evolved over the centuries and eventually kind of petrified at this. That is all hand embroidery, ladies and gentlemen. That's not applique also. And you can tell it's not applique because you can actually see, if you look closely, focus on the embroidery. If you look closely, you can see the warps and the wells from where there has been some, implying the embroidery under tension has created a little bit of warping in the fabric. That's a sign that it's embroidered, and it tends to be more of a sign that it's hand embroidered. This is basically silk painting. This is a traditional Korean style of needlework. And of course, you have all these auspicious, you've got the lotuses, of course, the symbol of the human soul festering in the horribleness that is the world and still being pure. You've got water, which is, another one of the chi flows through the water. You have the cranes, you have butterflies, peonies, right? The phoenixes, all of these symbols of longevity and prosperity and good luck. Yeah. Also on the sleeves. But this was an actual woman's, she lived in the 20th century, and this was her actual wedding robe. And this thing, if you were to commission something like this now, it would be, you'd have to pay $20,000, $30,000 easily for it. But this is modern. This is not historical. This is the modern take on it. And this is from the era when it had stopped being a royal robe and it started being a royal ceremonial robe. And it started being the robe of brides specifically. So here we have some headpieces, and I've actually gotten to wear all of this in a recreation, a reenactment of a Joseon-style wedding ceremony.
Also see.
Yeah, but these is all ceremonial for brides. These are the headpieces. These are not fashion pieces. You would not just wear these for any occasion. But interestingly, they've included in this a number. Doesn't have a number, does it? It does not. It does not. But that's a fan. That right there is apparently a fan, according to this. It's got embroidery on it. It's quite stunning. This is all very, very late. No longer really even Joseon anymore. Yeah, and another traditional bridal hair ribbon. You'll notice this one is black. Red is the color of royalty. On to men's headwear, historic men's headwear. And other layers. So I love this museum so much for the way it displays things. So you can actually see the tools used to make a kat and different kinds of kat. So you have a horsehair one, and then there's a straw one, and noblemen wore both. And you can see it in process, and you can appreciate the kind of handwork that this would entail. Number 6, the wooden frame on which it's sitting is an extant mold weaving, a wooden weaving brim. Basically, it's the mold for weaving the perfect brim. And it doesn't actually say to when it dates, but it looks loved for certain.
It does.
It definitely looks loved. And the kat, the black hat, that's horsehair. And if any of you have worked with horsehair, you can appreciate what that's going to do to your fingers after weaving a hat by hand out of it.
Let's see the tiny one.
Yeah, that's a tiny one. So number two is early 20th century. So that's, you've kind of moved out of the Joseon era at that point, more or less, right? And then they've included, excuse me, yeah. they've included a turumagi. So the turumagi is kind of like the 20th century version of the dangot, that garment that I said women used to wear as an overcoat, and it eventually became a man's garment only. This is a 20th century version of it, but they were actually wearing this like for real on a daily basis. And you can actually see photos of people wearing this turumagi all over Korea from photography up until up until the Korean War. You can still see this being worn. Even a little while afterwards, but the white one specifically. Okay, so on this case, we have not just ornamental bits, but practical bits as well. So if you've ever seen a Korean drama and you've seen the band that men are wearing around their heads, that is called a mangon. And there are 2 mangon here on display. They are also made of horsehair, a combination of horsehair and silk. And they are designed to keep the hair in place so that because men had long hair, they would put the hair up in a bun. If you want to look at me, I'll demonstrate the process. Men had long hair. They would put their hair into a top knot, and the mangon keeps that all in place, right? It keeps frillies like this are not going to come out because that would be disorderly and anti-Confucian. So that is the purpose of the mangon. It also provides a place from which you can suspend more of those lovely beads. And there are not many mangon makers left in Korea. I think there's like 3. So these are extant ones. These are late Joseon. So, who knows if the ones from early Joseon also looked like this. I'm going to bet they probably didn't change much though, because the function is the same. And they're definitely not a fashion garment. Okay, so but what we have there on the 2 little flat panels there, those are top knot pins. So that's how men would actually put their hair up into that top knot, how they would hold it in place. And it was an option for a little bit of decorative element. Pretty, but again, it shows you just how thick their hair must have been, because if I tried to put that top knot pin into one of my buns, it would just fall right out. So would my hair, there'd be nothing for it. Okay.
Box.
Yeah, the mangon box. Yeah, I love storage things. So that beautiful octagonal box, that is a box for the mangon. That is literally just to store it. It's how neat and organized it must have been to have a box for everything, but also to not have so much that you only had a few boxes anyway. Okay, so this is all mostly late Joseon, but one of the things I want to point out specifically that I think is super duper cool is the conical covering for the horsehair hat. So that is actually made of parchment and it's waxed. It's made of paper and it's waxed. And that actually goes over top of the gat. That goes over top of the gat to keep the rain out, because rain is just going to come straight through. So actually it's basically like a little mini rain, a slicker for your hat. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a gorgeous one. Yeah, this is a reproduction. It was made in 2014. Just look at the pattern on that. Oh, I want this one so badly. It is so beautiful. And rank absolutely tied in with brim width. I don't know how official it was. It could have just been a question of cost, but the more noble, the bigger the brim of your hat.
You need to do that one.
Yeah, right. Which is why, and this is 20th century. So you can see the evolution or the devolution between Joseon era and then, when the hats are starting to look a little more Western style. West as in Western society, not American West. Yeah, the straw hats. Yeah, so fine. So unfortunately, these horsehair hats don't often survive at all or well, so it can be very hard to find extant pieces. This is a reproduction of a nobleman's home hat, shall we say. This is what he would wear when he was in his own private residence. And the gat, this hat here, that is what a nobleman would wear when out and about and visiting, and he would not take his hat off, not even inside. If you're a nobleman, Joseon nobleman, and you are visiting people in their homes or wherever, court is a different world. Just forget court. I'm talking about private homes. Or if you're out and about in a public space, you will wear this hat, and you do not remove them to go inside. The gentleman who is at home, though, the nobleman who is at home, he wears this kind of hat at home. And there's different kinds, different sizes, depending on your actual rank. Joseon was known as the land of 1,000 hats, also the land of the white people because a lot of people dressed in white, right? And this little cap here, it would be worn inside of this one, so layers, right? So you'd have this hat, and then you would wear this one over top of it, and this one would help this one stay on, right? This one basically acts as like the frame, the resting post for other hats. But again, indoor wear, not necessarily outdoor. You would never go out in just this, is what I mean. Yeah. Scholars, Confucian scholars who went to Confucian schools wore hats like this one. And that dates back to mid-Joseon. We already talked about the prince's hat, and all of these are really late and post-period. We're getting to the end, we're getting to the Korean Empire, right? We're getting out of Joseon, really. Yeah, none of these are, if you're doing a medieval impression or a mid-Joseon impression, none of these are useful to you. Okay, yeah, no, that's all modern stuff. Any questions about the headwear, mostly for men? Women did have headwear. It was called a jeonmo, but there are no exhibits of that here. It was a frame hat, and they would wear veils when they went outside in them usually. Okay, if you have questions about the hats, we'll come back to them, but we're going to get to my favorite part of the exhibit. Two of my favorite parts, actually, but we're going to go over here, the extant garments. So unfortunately, they don't have a lot of their extant garments on display currently, but they do have a few. And they actually do change what's on display, so it is good to come back here and check things out. So that, my friends, that beautiful, delicate, gorgeously cut garment, that is a tangi dating to the mid-18th century. It is a gold brocade. The gold has mostly either tarnished or kind of worn away, but it is woven. It is not stamped on. And this was Princess Cheonggyong's tangi. So she was a little girl. People were smaller back then. They weren't that much smaller. This is tiny. This is a young princess's garment. But so yeah, compared to the early Joseon era one, which we'll compare against, and you can really see. But look at the sweep on that garment. So the tangi is in this style was generally, this was what you wore at court. You didn't wear this. This was not an out and about garment. As far as we can tell, this is what people wore in court. And in the 18th century, it wasn't quite as stylized as it gets later, and the tangi is still evolving. But you can tell it's a mid-Joseon tangi because it's open right up to the armpits. Maybe you can't tell that, but I can.
I can't tell that.
Sorry, everyone. But the craftsmanship on this thing is just absolutely stunning. And again, it's geometric construction. It's basically rectangles and squares, but it's interestingly wasteful because those curves, right? Those are curved bits that can't really be used in any other part of the garment. Now, where they could have, the curves may have been enough to get the collar out of that. And what you'll also notice is the collar isn't white, and it doesn't have a white band either. This is actually entirely in silk brocade, which also underscores probably its less ceremonial nature, and it's more like actually just being worn nature, because the ceremonial stuff tends to be pretty codified. You've got your white collar. White collar gets changed regularly. Here is an extant rank badge. This is not a reproduction. This is the dragon insignia for the royal family, right? And this is absolutely stunning. For those of you who do embroidery, like me, you will appreciate this so much. That it's also that it survived. That is gold thread. Gold thread is created by having a silk core, and then a thin gold foil is wrapped around that silk core. It is a laborious process to make gold thread before the modern era. And you can just imagine how much time it took to create this piece, right? I've made a dragon like this. It takes so much time. But this is an extant rank badge, so roughly 18th century, probably. Yeah. Questions about our lovely little tangi or the rank badge? Let me know, and we'll come back to it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And double tap the screen.
Which I think is just a lot.
Oh, they took away the extant one. It's just a picture, you assholes. Oh, it's been taken for exhibit somewhere else. I'm sorry, guys.
So weird to me.
I apologize profusely. I thought, Okay, well, this is a picture of the original. I have a pretty detailed series of pictures on this. I think I shared it with my patrons and my channel members. If you want the photos that I took of the original, which is now at a special exhibit somewhere else, I'm going to have to figure out where it is.
So we just were.
It's probably not at Seoul. Seoul National Museum never does hanbok. Anyway, this, my dear friends, this is a genuine reproduction of this piece. This was found in a grave. This was found in a tomb. And it, let me see, it's a tomb in Yeongdong, which is here in which is actually in Gyeonggi-do. So it's actually not from this area. It's up from near Seoul, roughly. And it dates to the early 16th century. This thing is so inspiring to me. They actually reproduced it using historical techniques, historical looms. They made the gold thread to brocade into it. Everything hand sewn, all the layers exactly as they found. And so it's really interesting. They actually, of course, the original doesn't look red at all, right? You look at the original and you think, oh, it's medieval drab. but of course, they analyzed the dye stuff and they found out it was kermes. For those of you who know what kermes is, you'll understand that that is an extremely expensive dye stuff and produces the best red ever. So here it is, the reproduction, complete with the cloud and crane motif woven into the brocade, with the gold brocaded in over top of the damask, with gold brocaded in over top of the damask. It is an absolutely stunning piece. And I think, no, they don't have the video up of them making it. But here you can see the fabric that they wove, right? So they wove two fabrics. I'll let you know when they get there. Oh, they're going to gold applique. Oh, they're doing the gold stamping. Oh, okay. Well, let's go ahead and look at the gold stamping. So this is not gold stamped, this fabric. It's brocaded, but they are showing you, here is a video, and I love Korea for this, how to do the gold stamping. So they just finished applying the gold leaf. That first they did put the glue down for the pattern, and now they've applied the gold leaf on top, and now they're putting a second layer of adhesive, and then eventually they're going to actually, yeah. Oh, look at that. My God. Look at her fingers shaking. Oh my God. Yeah, I would be too. I'm not criticizing. That's me. I imagine that's me. That is me exactly. Like I have to get this perfectly aligned. Right. And then, look at that. Look at how it shines. Oh, no, they're creating the thread. This is them creating the thread. This is the fabric. Okay. This is how they create the gold thread. So they create these bands of gold leaf, and then they slice it with that 16th century razor, right? Oh my God.
I'd still be shaking.
I'd still be shaking. Yeah, I recognize that now because I picked up from later in this the last time I was here.
I don't know what they're doing now.
Oh, her hands are still shaking. I'm shaking for her. And we know she was successful because the fabric turned out beautifully. Right, she's picking up the gold leaf pieces. Wow. I guess they're not going to get, I guess this is just, they're just showing how to make the gold strips for the thread. Well, I'll let you know if they get past that part. Anyway, so those gold strips that you just saw them cutting out, those get woven into this brocade, those hand cut gold strips. Yeah, so you can imagine the labor of love this must have been, because they had to do two different batches. They had to do the red for the body, and then by studying the dye stuff, they found out that the collar was actually a different color. So they needed two colors of this brocade in order to accomplish this. And those are cloud and bird designs. So you can actually, you may or may not be able to see, because it's very stylized, right? Clouds and birds are very auspicious creatures of the heavens and all that.
They might be able to see it on there.
Right, but they've specifically included Korea era pottery that has cloud and birds designs, celadon, that has cloud and bird designs on it, so you can maybe see the pattern a little more clearly, because especially in the center of this probably soju jar, possibly wine, but also possibly soju, you can really see it. So yeah, this garment is also slit up the sides. This jeogori is also slit up to where about her natural waist would be. And you know, again, I read this fashion historian claiming must be a sign that it's a ceremonial garment. Again, I say bullshit. I say if you actually wear these garments and you try to sit in the floor on one that's seamed shut at the sides, it's going to be much easier to get up and down if it's open. Also, if it's open at the sides, then it's going to actually like fall down into these nice little pleats here in the front of your waist. And then you'll have that lovely silhouette. And then your skirts will actually show through. So I actually do want to make a reproduction of this myself, not as they've done it, because I don't have eternal life. I don't have the time to become a master damask weaver and brocade weaver and make my own gold thread. But I do want to make one of this cut using at least vaguely historically accurate silks and whatnot. So that is on my docket for creations. Okay, questions about these extant garments? If you have more questions, let me know and we'll come back to them. We're going to move on to another exhibit of a little known technique that Korea has. Everyone thinks of rugs and carpets and they think of the steppes, they think of the Middle East, they think of Turkey. But Korea had its own rug weaving art. And the problem is that most of these haven't survived. And so we imagine historical Korean spaces, medieval Korean spaces, and we imagine just a polished wooden floor. That's not true. We're missing a big part of it. The big part is these amazingly stunning carpets, right? And they actually have here a depiction of someone actually sitting on one of these carpets. You know, once you find an extant piece suddenly and you start looking in the art, suddenly you'll see it. Now this one dates to the 19th century. And I believe, if I recall correctly, these are woven of wool and cotton. Yeah, it looks like it, but you know, you might look at this and think it's a blanket. No, this is a rug. This goes on the floor. And the technique is now called Joseon, which basically modam is another word for it. And yeah, so apparently these actually were transmitted to Japan through Korea via diplomatic missions. Now, they don't know, you know, why exactly these made it to Japan, why, you know, for what reason they were given as gifts, that's kind of unclear. But apparently they were also being exported to Japan sometime during the Edo period, so which is 1600 to 1868 for those who don't know. But look at these. I mean, can you imagine in your beautiful 15th century hanbok with this on the wooden floor and you're just sitting on this? Now this is stamped. This pattern is not woven. It's actually stamped into it. Still really lovely. I just love these details about daily life, these things that make often historic spaces, historic buildings are barren of their original furnishings and decorative items. So when we have something like this really livens the space for me. It gives it life. It makes it feel warm and actually inhabited. You know, I can almost feel the ghosts of the past connected to these because people sat on them. There's stains all over this. They ate on them. They probably spilled their wine on them. God knows what other things they spilled on them, right? So this is like a literal tangible connection to the past, which for me as a living historian is very exciting. I really love this one in particular, the motif. Okay, are there questions about anything? Did you want to go back and look at any of the hanbok? Discuss any more about the extant pieces we have? I'm sorry there aren't more right now of the medieval historic pieces. They keep rotating the exhibit out. So yeah, like we never know what's actually going to be here. Yeah, isn't that beautiful? Yeah. Yeah, so does Rachel. So does the Contessa. Okay, if anyone wants to go back to any of the pieces, let me know. Otherwise, yeah, well, right. Yep. Right. Okay. For those of you who weren't here at the beginning, we're just going to do a quick walkthrough. I'm not going to go through all the details, but if you have questions about anything, we will answer them. So if you come to the Daegu National Museum and you go to the hanbok past, present, and future, this is what will greet you currently. We'll see how long this is here. Right, we've got all sorts of different styles of jeogori and ornamental bits, most of which date to the 19th or 20th century, but we do have the historic reproductions here, which are based on grave finds. And the thing that a lot of people don't realize, there are a lot of graves in Korea with wet mummies. And I know that sounds horrifying, but hear me out. Wet mummies when you have wet mummies, you nearly always have clothing that survives. And so when they open these graves up, because either they're building a highway or they've put a dam in place or something like that, they then find extant garments. So there's an increasing number of extant garments from the medieval Korea and Joseon Korea. And especially when they're opening up these stone pagodas, which we started this tour with, when you actually open them up, you often find clothing that has been dedicated to the Buddha, but that was real clothing. It's just that the owner eventually donated it to the temple so that it can be entombed with a relic inside the pagoda as a votive garment, which happens in Europe too, fascinatingly. You know, so you have these extant garments that then get donated to the church, and then they get used on votive statues or in reliquaries, but they were once actual garments that were actually worn. So we're just doing a quick turbo walkthrough of the pieces in the hanbok collection. If you see anything you want to look at more closely, just let me know. Here we are at the modern wedding wonsam. Wonsam is the name of this beautiful angel winged garment that I know everyone wants to have, but unfortunately is just a ceremonial garment. So the unfortunately part is for people doing living history who want a wonsam for daily wear. It wasn't a daily wear garment, unfortunately. Then we get to the hats. All the hats. Joseon is the land of 1,000 hats. And, you know, this exhibit only gives you like 5 different kinds. So I guess actually we've probably seen 20 different kinds at this point. The nobleman's hats at home. Just so elegant. Love it so much. And then finishing up with our historic hanbok. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I was just reading the sign. That was actually a sign. Yep. So here we are at the extant garments. Okay. Well, everyone, are there any final questions about hanbok, historical hanbok, extant pieces that we have? Just let me know. Did we want to go on to the other parts of the museum? Yeah. So there's a special exhibit on incense burners. Yeah. Great. Let's go. Okay. If you have questions, let us know. We're moving on to the next part. The special exhibit. Oh no, is the special exhibit closed? I was so excited. Oh, I think it's closed. Oh, we missed it. The cultural history of Korean incense. Okay, well, we'll go to one of the regular exhibits then. This way. Oh, 감사합니다. Okay. Digital art zone. Okay. Oh, right, this part that has, right, nothing in English. But thankfully, I actually recognize some of these pieces, so it doesn't matter that none of it's in English. Oh, this is another private donation collection, right? So in Korea, often we have people with extreme wealth who collect historical pieces and then donate to them to museums. So these are such pieces, and these are all Sheila era. So these are actually, this is all relating to equestrians. So for my equestrians out there, this is tack bling. These would go on your bridle, on your barding, on your saddles, on your reins. Yeah, so these are all found in graves. This is the kind of stuff you can find if you dig around in the ground here in Korea.
Nicholas says your dress is really pretty.
Oh, thank you, Nicholas. I am today dressed in my 17th century style Reimi hanbok, which means chima is around the waist and the jeogori is long to the waist as well. And it has these insets in it. So that's a sign of a 17th century style hanbok. Late 17th, early 18th century. Yeah. Oh, here we have some extant swords from the Sheila era. So first half of the first millennium, and still with wooden sheaths even, which is pretty impressive.
So the camera got all bound up.
Yeah, that any of this wood survives is quite remarkable. And actually, you can see some of the pieces. So if we look at this wall redrawing, it's important though, because some of these pieces you can actually see over here, and if you don't have the drawing, then you might not know what they are. So you see these bits that kind of top the posts, ornamental post toppers on a wagon, or ornamental ends on a parasol for the wagon, right? We find those in the record, and you might just find this thing and wonder, what is it? Well, if you have a drawing like this, or a painting, or a tomb mural or pottery design, then you can actually figure out what a lot of these random metal bits are. It's a pretty cool application for art, I think.
Trust me, she's not.
That's a whetstone. Yep. Right, so for example, we were talking about the parasol end ornaments. Those are what those scary looking hooked things actually are. And those hooks would be for securing the fabric, right? That would be the part that would catch the fabric of the parasol. And of course, no culture is complete without some good old violence. So we've got spearheads, which actually, these are bronze. So this is probably actually first millennium BC, because they had moved on to iron by the Three Kingdoms period. Yeah, bronze daggers in a scabbard. They're so beautiful. They're elegant for certain. Okay. We went the wrong way, as we always do. Moving on to the next part. If there's any piece you all want to see more closely, let me know. Of course, if you have questions, pop them in the chat, and hopefully we will get it. The Ancient Culture Hall. So, pots, pottery. I don't know. Right. Okay. So if you come to this museum, they of course always start in prehistory, and as in many parts of the world, the prehistoric record shows a long history of human habitation and civilization. Now, what's interesting about what we don't often see, actually, so if we look at these stones here, this stone on stone thing going on here, that's a grinding stone. And that's interesting because that shows both the presence of agriculture, to be able to have grain to grind, but also that they were grinding grain into flour, which means they were making some kind of bread with it, or some kind of something. Pastry, definitely not pastry. Definitely not pastry. Unfortunately, this part of the exhibit is only in Korean, and my Korean isn't good enough, but I'm pretty certain that that's fossilized food items there, piled up, probably carbonized from being in a fire for a long, long time. So if you're into prehistory, Korea is also a place for you. Just like many places in the world, pottery sort of erupted pretty heavily by the 10th century. There's kind of pottery everywhere to be found, which shows people finding a productive use for fire other than cooking. And it's interesting when you see holes like this in ancient pottery. Even though it hasn't survived, that tells you that they had some kind of string or rope, because that's what would go through those holes. And these pottery bits don't really necessarily have the residues of the people who used them or made them, but the soft bits, the rope, that's for me, that's where things get tangible, where I really feel connected to a past people. Pottery and metal are almost too cold, but the fabrics and textiles really connect me to them. So for those of you who are into pottery, there could be some inspiration for some new shapes and new options here. Vessels like this we often find in tombs, this kind of vessel stand shape, and it's possible in later Korea, not modern, not even modern, later Korea, like the last 2,000 years at least, these kinds of vessels you find in tombs, and they're used in funerary rites. So you'd actually put food in these and entomb the food in these vessels in the tomb together, right? So that the deceased can have them in the afterlife. Now, this is so far back that who knows if that's how they were actually used, but it seems likely to me anyway.
Susan says, in the Sheila Museum have some gorgeous pottery.
Oh yeah, so we just so you know, we're about 5 45 kilometers from Gyeongju as the crow flies. So this is all in the Gyeongju area, right? We are still in the greater Sheila sphere of influence here. For my horsey people, those scary looking piles of rust there, those are horse bits. Those are snaffle bits with a kind of pelham-esque attachment to it. So you could probably, those would be double rein bits, and you would have a lot of control over your horse by having two sets of reins, right? For those of you who ride, you know whereof I speak.
It's just a club.
Actually,
That was a previous book.
it is not, yeah. Right. So, you know, the metal work that you find in some of these areas is really intricate. Like, look at 11. That's gorgeous. And that is no, that is, wow, okay, that's interesting. It claims it's a Chinese, so this apparently, right, okay, this is a buckle. Number 11 is a buckle, right? Yeah, that's pretty beautiful. I would wear a belt buckle like that. Also, I could probably kill someone with a belt buckle like that. Oh, yeah, look at those buckles. Wow, those are gorgeous. 13. So this is kind of evidence of the trade routes, even in this era, being the trade ties with China being extreme, because these were made in China. And then they were imported here and probably worn here, and then they were buried here. So, you know, yes, I know China is not necessarily that far, but still, you know, this is an era when you have to go by foot or go by horseback. So yeah, those are pretty beautiful. Look at the detail on this. That cute little horse with its tail all bound up for war. And then of course, you know, a tiger, as is the most manly of symbols of real animals anyway. Dragon is the most manly of symbols, but not a real animal. Yeah, these jars are pretty cool. Yeah, this when off. So these are burial urns. They put whole bodies in these. These are not food storage urns. Yeah, I would fit easily, handily in any of these. Well, okay, some of them I would only fit if you put me in pieces, but okay, not all of them are burial urns. These big boys right here are burial urns, apparently, according to what I read. Which is an interesting way of entombing people. Very eco-friendly. Pottery is, you know, pretty good for the soil, as it were. Right, for my horsey people, this is more beautiful bits of tack that have been excavated relatively close to here. Again, Sheila era, so we're talking like probably 5th, 6th century AD, and that is also a horse pit. That is a horse. Wow, you're gonna have a lot of control over a horse with leverage like that. Yeah. And now we get into armor, right? So here, for those of you who are into the medieval martial arts, here we have bracers, basically. So that would go on the forearm, and the round bit would protect your elbow.
Yes, they probably did braid the mane for war.
Oh, yeah. Question, did they braid horses' manes and tails for war? Yes. I can't imagine they wouldn't. It would make no sense not to. We're in the period of lamellar style armor, meaning you have lamellae, the plates that are all kind of stitched together. It provides pretty decent protection and good flexibility. That's unexpected.
But the reconstruction.
Yeah.
Or the extremely long ring sword.
Right.
Okay, this ring sword is.
This is this is the longest ring sword I have ever seen.
What's the number on it? Does it have a number?
No, there's something weird happened here. This part of the exhibit is missing stuff. See, there's nothing here about this reconstruction. This is the first proper reconstruction I've seen of the lamellar armor to show you how they think it went together. So apparently the current theory is that it wasn't just laced together, it was laced together over leather strips, which would make sense. That would definitely provide even more.
That explains the imagery that I've seen too.
Right.
It looks like that.
Right.
I was wondering how they got that.
So apparently this is the current theory. Now, I don't know. It's probably because they actually found bits of leather intact on the lamellar plates. And so they deduced from that this would be the construction method. It makes sense. It would definitely provide, otherwise you're lacing plates to plates. And they do that too, but it definitely makes sense to have that extra layer to provide strength to something that's going to get the hell beaten out of it pretty heavily. Yeah. And of course we have Yeah, more weapons of war, spears, some very, very nasty looking arrowheads. Look at those things. Oof, I would not want to be the recipient of any of these. These would be, I mean, not happy, but those would be terrible.
Those ones would be really terrible.
The axe. Oh, wait, what are you looking at?
Yeah, the middle bottom arrowheads. The huge heads.
Those aren't arrowheads.
Those aren't?
No, those are not arrowheads. Those are like spear tips. No, those are not arrowheads. Oh, look at that. Look at the beautiful filigree on that helmet. That's really lovely. 6th century. Yeah. This is all Sheila era. So first millennium, first half of the first millennium, basically. Gold. We're in the Sheila. We're basically in the greater sphere of influence of the Sheila, but this was not the capital of Sheila, so the finds are not quite as splendid as they are over in Gyeongju.
They're a little bit hard to see, so we'll kind of go through them. If you want us to try and focus, just ask.
So apparently the current theory on the so-called earrings seems to be that people had pierced ears, but that they ran strings or ribbons through the rings to attach them into the holes in their ears. I don't know that, I mean, maybe? It seems like it would be uncomfortable though.
You don't see anything in the artwork to make it look like they've opened the earlobes to.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know if they're basing that assumption that people did in fact pierce their ear on anything concrete or just pure supposition.
Oh, that was kind of cool.
So all of these are gilt bronze, right? So it's got a bronze base and then it's gilt with gold leaf over top of that. And that's because this is not the court, this is not the center of power of the Sheila dynasty. But still, the aristocrats like to dress up. So this is how aristocrats would bling themselves up, not royalty. Interesting to think of aristocrats wearing what to us seem pretty large crowns, but then when you see the ones from Gyeongju, you realize you're wrong. But this one is pretty cool. Check this one out. Yeah, this one is completely different from any of the other crowns or coronets I've seen excavated in this era. It really almost feels like some aristocrat was saying, I will be different. And he went to a goldsmith and he said, make me something splendid and different. Yeah, we've got children incoming. We've got children incoming. Yeah, flee, flee. Of course, bling, ever a human preoccupation. But what's interesting here is they found spindle whorls, which are up there, and they've taken the time to actually show you a reconstruction of the spindle whorl, I think using an extant one actually, so that you would understand how it functioned. For those of you who don't spin and you wonder what a spindle whorl is, it's the thing that creates the weight and allows the spin to actually happen. So they've number 3. This is real. Wow, they actually have some interesting things here. So again, I'm always excited by the soft bits. What is included in soft bits, in case you're wondering? That apparently is part of a loom, number 3.
That thing in the back.
Yeah, the thing in the back, that piece, sorry, the piece of that big piece of wood that's actually part of a loom, which is fascinating. And then we have an extant bit of straw mat. And it was found at a wetland site. That makes sense. It was probably in anaerobic mud, yay bog finds. But, you know, that's so tantalizing to me because, you know, those kind of materials actually capture the oils from people's hands. And then it's like by touching that, you're touching them somehow across the centuries. And then that is a piece of textile of some kind. What are you? Threads. Those are actually threads. Oh my God. Oh my God. So exciting. Oh my God. I'm sorry. Very excited. That bit of braid looking thing, that is actually extant thread. Unfortunately, they do not provide the fiber content at all. Very sad. But apparently, where are the numbers? Why are there no numbers on anything? One of these pieces of metal has traces of fabric attached to it. And I'm going to assume it's, yeah, I think it's the belt. You can see it. Yeah, you can see it. Maybe you guys can't, but I can. On the belt buckle itself, there is a discolored part, and that must be a piece of fabric. That's very exciting because otherwise we have almost nothing that survives from this era. And for those of you who do weaving and do warp weighted weaving. Back there, the little nut looking thing behind that bar, that wooden weaving bar, that is a warp weight. And so, you know, if you ever wonder, did they do warp weighted looms in ancient Korea? Hello. Hello. You're all very cute. 귀엽다. Hi, ladies. Hello. Hello. Oh, 고맙다. 고맙다. Hi, ladies. She just said I was pretty. When a 3 or 4-year-old tells you you're pretty, you know they're telling the truth because they don't have a lie filter. They say it like it is, or a nice filter rather. They say it like it is. Anyway, warp weighted loom weights back there. Yeah, warp weighted loom weights. That's what that little poop looking thing is. It's not poop. It's a warp weight for weaving. And for those, I guess, come to me. For those who don't know what warp weighted weaving is, we now have horizontal looms, which, you know, you work like this, and you've probably seen someone working a horizontal loom at some point in a movie or something. Anyway, warp weighted looms are upright, and basically the threads that are the warp, the part that runs like this in your fabric along the length, they're actually suspended from a beam up here, and they're held down and in place by these weights that help you maintain tension on them. That's why it's called a warp weighted loom, because the warp is actually weighted.
So that bar would be the top piece. The strings would have.
That bar could be the top piece, or that bar might be, it doesn't say what kind of loom that's from. They just say loom accessory. And I assume probably because they found like thread wear and tear in the wooden. It unfortunately doesn't explain why they think it's a loom accessory. They just call it a loom accessory. Yep. So I'm assuming it's because they found them in the context with, you know, the spindle whorls and the warp weights and threads and whatnot. I'm assuming that's maybe also part of the reason they assume it was part of the loom. Yep. Okay, questions about these this is new, by the way. This was not here the last time I was here. So I'm so excited and tantalized by that little bit of fiber right there. Oh my God, that's so exciting. I'm so cute. Yeah, that's what the little girl said. Okay, here we have bling, Sheila era bling, but found locally. You've got glass beads, which would have been made in Indonesia and Malaysia, Southern Asia, basically. So those are imported. You've got jade, we've got agate, we've got some other stones, precious stones that I actually don't necessarily recognize, but these were all excavated here. There's actually a tomb park here we've never gotten to. We should get to at some point. That'll be our next live stream. The tomb park, walking through the tomb park. But they excavated the tomb park, the hill graves, and these are the things they found in them. Shoe. It's a shoe. It's a shoe. Okay, I'm excited here. So this was from the shoe exhibit that was last year, unfortunately, before I started doing this live streaming stuff, really. So footwear. This is ancient footwear. So that wooden clog, that platform shoe is exactly what you think it is. It is a platform shoe. You would wear another shoe with it, though. You wouldn't wear just that. This is to wear outside and to get you out of the muck and the mud. It is not intended to be a shoe in and of itself. So not a fashion shoe, a practical, like the ancient equivalent of a galosh 2,000 years ago in Korea, right? And then there in that mud, that is the sole, the extant sole of a straw shoe that dates to 2,000 years ago. And it ended up in the mud, in the anaerobic muck, and it basically just got preserved. And so you can actually see that the bottom of straw shoes from 2,000 years ago are almost not at all different in any way to the ones that they were making up until 100 years ago as part of regular fashion, and now they make as part of folk fashion in Korea. So that's always interesting when a technology doesn't change at all or a technique doesn't change at all. And why should it? If it works, don't fix it, right? But over here, you have combs, bits of actual wooden combs that also survived in the mud. And so this kind of fills in that picture of hairstyling and how they did it. And these combs look very similar in terms of closely spaced tines to, you know, their European cousins. Now, interestingly, that is a shark tooth necklace back there. Those shark teeth, they are part of a shark tooth necklace set that dates to about 2,000 years ago as well. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be the one to go and fish that shark using 2,000-year-old methods. Okay. Coronet. Questions? Okay.
Well, we focus on this.
Yes. Were nobles' golden crowns intricate and delicate? If you sneeze, would it?
That's it.
That's it. Okay.
What?
They are
It would shimmer.
They are intricate, but they do not feel delicate at all. They're heavy. They are not delicate. They are sturdy as hell. I have a miniature reproduction of one. I'll have to show you. I'll show you guys in my live stream, my medieval crafting party, sewing party tomorrow. Yeah, they're not delicate.
Remind us.
Remind me to show you, and I'll even put it on my head and then tell you what a headache it gives me almost immediately. Not delicate, intricate, but not delicate. For my pottery fans, they've just got such fun pottery from the first millennium in Korea. I just love this ship so much. Now, they don't know why they built them, if they were votive, if they were toys that just ended up being in tomb. Maybe this was the deceased's favorite toy as a child. Oh, who knows? But if you're into pottery, into making pottery, here's some inspiration for some fun, different kinds of things you can make.
But the really neat thing is this was probably built based on a real model, so it's one of the few ways that we can really tell.
Yeah, so a lot of this votive pottery is the only way we know about the daily details of life. So this shows us what a ship, probably a pleasure boat, looked like in Sheila. Look, everyone, we're back to duck-shaped stuff.
RateMyDuck.com.
RateMyDuck.com, duck-shaped pottery. But you can tell that this is local and that it is less refined than what we find in Gyeongju, in the tombs in Gyeongju. So that is an interesting thing to note. It's still cool. And I just love how shocked these ducks look. Like they seem to be shocked that they're now pottery. Like what happened? And again, the theory on why there are so many ducks in Sheila pottery is or other birds is that they were supposed to carry you to the heavens. It was supposed to carry the soul to the heavens. But who knows? Maybe people just like ducks. Duck is good. Oh, this one's so cool. Turtle. They just call this turtle-shaped pottery. They generally don't know what a lot of these pieces were actually used for. But his tail has his mouth. That's not his tail. Sorry. That's his little head. His mouth has a spout, and it's got an opening there. So theories on what it could be used for. This cute little turtle-shaped pottery.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say the horse pottery is what lets us know where a lot of the blingy pieces were.
Yeah, horse pottery is great because it tells us about horse tack in Sheila and what all these little metal bits we find actually were used for. Now, this is great.
Oh, yeah, because
look at this.
At the top, you can see that's how they do the thatch even today.
Yeah, so this is what they refer to this as house-shaped pottery, house-shaped vessel. So it has an interior space, liquids could go into it, but it is actually shaped like a common person's house. And so, this is a way that they can get ideas on construction techniques because it actually has like the wooden beams on the inside have been carved into it and the wooden beams on top. And it wouldn't surprise me if maybe there weren't originally thatching, like actual thatching on this, and the thatching is gone, but the pottery frame has stayed around. And I think there's a kitty on top.
Does look like a kitty.
I'm going to go with kitty.
No, that's definitely a kitty.
It's a kitty. This is definitely a Sheila kitty. We are committing. That's a cute little kitty on top. You can tell which animal we think is superior as a companion. And then, of course, as always, the wall grave good pottery. I mean, tell you, Sheila potters, they had a racket going. They really did.
Well, set up by era. Gaia beginning here.
Yeah, so Gaia to Sheila. Yeah, so, and also the kingdom, not just era, but Gaia was a different kingdom, right? So Gaia was down in the Busan area, which I know seems close now, but back then it was a different kingdom. And so, you can actually see some stylistic differences. Like this is actually more ornate. If you look at that, what they would call a pottery stand, it's actually more detailed and ornate than their Sheila cousins. So if you're into pottery, Korea is definitely a place to come if you want new inspiration on what to make. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that we'll check one more hall. We will check one more. There's one more hall. Yeah, there's one more hall.
Oh, medieval culture.
Unfortunately, it's mostly statuary, and it's mostly Buddhist, which is not unfortunate in and of itself. But Buddhist art tends to be very stylized, so it's not necessarily useful for picking up clues about actual clothing or accessories. But it's really beautiful, and you wouldn't really know looking at this. For example, this statuette here dates to the 8th century. Oh, okay.
Did they use chamber pots?
Yes, absolutely. New Rex, they definitely defecated in chamber pots. And in fact, not necessarily pottery. The upper classes had them made out of brassware. The kings, for example, had a very special one that had a very nice lid with dragons on it. And, when he would, and it would actually have this nice curve in it. So it's like butt shaped. So when you sit in it, it's kind of comfy. And then the servants would put the lid on and carry it out and dispose of the effluents, probably in some special way. The dragon dump. But in earlier periods, yeah, it was pottery, chamber pots for the win. Yeah, these are some really gorgeous pieces. 9th to 10th century. Goryeo dynasty, so 11th through 14th century. It can get a little annoying with dating in Korea because they tend to date things by dynasty, but dynasties can last hundreds of years and there's changes across the centuries. So I do get a little irritated when historians don't try. Yeah, Joseon is literally like the 1389 until 1905 or something like that. Oh, well, thank you all for joining me today. And if you're enjoying, don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, so here we have, yeah, send a ruby, weirdly. I know, we just recently learned about rubies or diamonds or something. Anyway, the pensive bodhisattva. So I love this one because it's very, you actually see the pensiveness in the way this person is sitting there and thinking. The pose is so modern, so contemporary, it's so human that we can actually relate to this bodhisattva, which is kind of like a Buddhist saint, a pre-ascension Buddha, basically, just sitting there pondering, right? But this is a real person. This isn't some mythical figure. I've been there. Have you have any of you not assumed this position of pensiveness while pondering the weight of the universe and, nirvana?
Last time.
Right. And here we have another example of this pensive state, right? The pensive bodhisattva. 7th century. So these date back pretty far. These are pretty cool. And if you study Buddhism and if you study Buddhist art, one of the things you need to do, and I need to get better at, is learning the different hand positions. So depending on the hand position, it actually shows Buddha in a different stage of Buddha's journey. And also pre-nirvana, post-nirvana, that kind of thing. So I need to get better at that. It's just like learning all of the saints' martyrdom objects and symbolism in Western art. These are gongs, ceremonial gongs, which, who doesn't need a good gong, especially if you have children? Bells, the beautiful bells. If you come to Korea, you must go to one of the historic temples and just wait for them to ring the bells and hear the sound resonating over the mountains.
That's when it's go to Suwon.
If you go to Suwon, you can ring a giant ancient bell yourself with a giant ringer. You can really get
3,000.
you pay 3,000 won for 3 strikes of the bell. And in some Korean museums, this bell in particular, the Vajra bell, the one on the left there, they actually have a reproduction of that. I think it's at the Seoul Museum, right? The Seoul National Museum. They have a reproduction, faithful, and you can actually pick it up and ring it and hear what it's like. I just love Korea and their interactive approach to museums. I really do. Okay, yeah. So Joseon was an extremely literate society, not in the sense of everyone was literate, but in the sense that the people who did read a lot. The scholars spent hours upon hours every day, their whole lives, continuing their studies. And they have printing, right? Printing is not a Western invention, it's an Eastern invention, and they've been printing for over 2,000 years in Korea. So they have a lot of books dating back pretty far.
They call that a scepter, but I think those are reading, they call that a scepter, but I think it was actually a reading, like a
no, that's a coronet.
Number one.
Oh, number one. No, I've seen that in ceremonial portraits. So here, if you all look, we've got some items of official clothing here. You've got, this is a coronet, so for official use only. You don't, just wear this anytime you want. And then that's a belt for an official to wear, and that's not a king or a royal coronet. That's for one of the upper level bureaucrats, what we might call them. But what's interesting about it is the horsehair parts have actually survived, which doesn't always happen. So you can see the metalwork, but then also the horsehair parts as well. Seems to be mid-Joseon based on the records. And the problem with, so here we have art, and I can briefly give you my lecture about the dangers of art and art history when you are using it to inform fashion. So Joseon style painting is extremely conservative. Court painting, official painting is as well. There's a, oh, no, it's not. He's sitting on a leopard skin.
Oh, he's sitting on
Yeah, no, okay. Okay, I retract it. Okay, anyway, art. So not only did official garments not change very much or at all over the centuries, but the style of painting didn't either. So what that means is, if paintings caught on fire and burnt up, and they did all the time in Joseon, they would recreate them, and they would basically keep them exactly the same way as they were before, but they would paint the person, say the person's lived in 1600, they're repainting in 1800, they're going to repaint them in how they know people dress now in 1800. So even if it's a portrait of such and such a king from 700 years ago, the portrait is probably not from 700 years ago and does not reflect 700 years ago practices, might not even look at all like that king did.
So you have to know when it was painted.
So you have to know when it was painted to understand what is actually happening in the painting. Yeah, so these they had extant rank badges here, but I think they have they've been sent elsewhere. But yeah, you've got No, I mean, they had the original. These are reproductions.
Oh.
Yeah.
Number one say it's been a reproduction? That one looks old.
No, sorry. The tiger ones are reproductions. Number one is late Joseon, so late 19th century.
Dang it.
It happened again. You did it. You showed the message.
I don't want to show the message.
It's amazing how well preserved they are for the age and how they survived, all considering how Imperial Japan tried to destroy Japanese culture. Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, that anything has survived at all is remarkable. So many levels. Yeah, Japan, when Japan occupied Korea, they tried hard to make this Japan, really hard. But for those who missed my lecture on rank badges, if you can see where this would go, this official is wearing a rank badge. He has 2 cranes, so he's very high ranking. I think that might be second or third rank, maybe third. Yeah, second rank, I think. 1 crane is a lower rank, but if it's an air creature, a bird, then that's a bureaucrat. That's a civil servant. If it's a quadruped like these leopards here, those are soldiers. Those are men at arms. So generals would have quadrupeds, especially 2 quadrupeds on their rank badge, right? And remember, if it's a square rank badge, not royalty. If it's a round rank badge, royalty.
These are personal.
Yeah, and these are identification tags, and everyone in Joseon had one, and it had your name on it, it had your rank on it, and I think it had where you're from, where you were born, and hypothetically, you were always supposed to have your identification tag on you at all times, and it should be demanded. It should be produced if demanded. But what I haven't read is what prevented people from counterfeiting them or how they protected against counterfeiting. So if you have an idea about that, let me know. In the comments, please. Okay, so here we have, these are brass seals, and they just say it with a figure of horses. These are late Joseon, and they've showed you both sides. So the horses are not the seal, that's just decorative. Heavenly horses are, a thing. But they do have one flipped over so you can actually see the seal. So that you would actually paint that and then use that to seal something. Yes. Did king's sons have different rank badges due to birth order? That's a good question.
I don't think we've even seen that in the pen.
Yeah, I don't think I haven't.
Like 2.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything about king's sons having, because it wasn't necessarily about birth order. The crown prince was not always or even often the firstborn son. The crown prince was actually chosen and appointed, and so you could appoint them from amongst a variety of sons, including concubine sons. So I don't think so. in fact. So these are ritual ewers, kundika, and I'm probably mispronouncing that because I've never heard the word said aloud, but this is all part of, these are part of incense burning, and especially used during the Goryeo period, because of course in the Goryeo period, Buddhism was still the original religion. So these are ewers and these are incense burners. Ewers are for water, for sprinkling water, for applying water, and then look at these beautiful incense burners. Of course, you would light the incense, and there's a couple of ways this could work. They didn't necessarily have incense sticks, but they had lumps of incense, and they would light the lumps of incense, and they would go inside this beautiful container, and then you put the lid on, and then the incense comes out in these designs through those holes. So it creates a really mystical effect. Also prevents you from suffocating on your incense. Right. Oh, look at this gorgeous piece of, look at this gorgeous container from the Goryeo dynasty. Isn't that beautiful? Oh my gosh. Wow. So you would hardly know that this thing is 700 or 800 years old. I would store all kinds of things in that. Lots of things. No, I think it probably I think this was probably used to store smaller containers with cosmetics and skin creams in them.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. Okay. This is a hair ornament from Goryeo. Those of you doing a noble woman's impression from the Goryeo dynasty, just imagine that basically stuck into the bun, the way your hair, just what a beautiful effect that would be. Oh, so gorgeous. I do love the bling.
Sure, the Crown Prince badge is different from his other brothers.
I don't think so. Oh, the Crown Prince badge?
Versus the other brothers.
I can't answer that. No, I definitely can't answer that.
What's that?
Wow. Okay, so here, these are this is a reliquary. So I talked about the pagodas, the pagoda we started this tour with. Inside of the pagodas, they find things like this. That is a reliquary. So it's a beautiful gilt container, and inside of that is a little glass vial, which could have ashes in it from some revered monk, or possibly someone might claim Buddha's ashes. And then that is sealed up and then put inside of those stone pagodas. So that's an example of, how spirituality and religiosity were expressed in the Goryeo dynasty. Now, once Taejo was a big Confucian. So he basically quashed Buddhism as a state religion as much as possible. Oh my God. Look at this gorgeous thing. So this is the United Shila period. Yeah, Unified Shila period. Yeah. So this probably dates to the 6th or 7th century, and that piece of glass in there that has been imported. There's 2 pieces of glass in there. There's a glass vial inside of a beautiful glass cup right here. This will provide. Even though if this is a picture of it, you'll get a better picture. So we have this stunning blown glass vial. I mean, wow, inside of this amazing glass. And these come from Constantinople or thereabouts. So that shows you the kind of trade routes. We're talking 5th, 6th century AD in Korea, the edge of Asia, the eastern edge of Asia, basically. And that made it all the way from Rome, basically, either Western Rome or Eastern Rome, all the way to here, and survived. Isn't that stunning? I mean, wow. But look at also this gold work, the detail, the beauty of this little pagoda that houses this reliquary. It is so delicate and so much love. You can, I often feel craftsmen, they get over monetized. People feel, oh, well, they're just doing it to make money. But no, craftsmen, especially if it's the right kind of commission, really invest their souls into their creation. And as a craftsman myself, I can really feel the kind of heart that went into making this. So many delicate bits, so many tiny details that unfortunately I don't think you can see in the camera. I mean, pierced work on each little bezant, the tiny gold chain where each link was made by hand and perfectly wrought.
You might be able to see better than I can, actually.
This really looks like a stylized pavilion from this era. And it's pieces like this that give archaeologists a clue as to how the wooden structures may have looked. So when they're doing reconstructions of Shila era buildings, which they are, they look at things like this to get an idea for how the railing might look or the motifs that would be built into the wood. So again, a way in which even religious art can be used to help us inform daily life in the era.
I think
Yeah.
perfume bottles look like. Perfume bottles.
What, I'm sorry, was that a question?
Do we know what perfume bottles from that era?
We do not, but I'm going to assume that the glass ones were not used by everyone. No, actually, we don't know. I have not seen anything specifically about perfume containers or bottles from this era, or even the practice of perfuming specifically.
Votive pagodas.
Yeah, so these are miniatures of the real deal, which some of these are quite large indeed, like 30, 35, 40 feet tall. Really impressive structures. Question?
14%.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so this is not a religious item. This is just a candlestick, happily. So you can imagine that probably a pillar candle would have gone on top of this. It's really beautiful though, and it looks a lot like its European cousins, which could be accidental, and it's probably accidental, but still. I love finding these connections between East and West.
Marriage keys.
Yeah. So now we're moving into Joseon for certain, and mid-Joseon. This is a wedding goose. People say they're ducks. They are not ducks. They are geese. It's a special kind of goose, right? And you would actually have a pair of these on a wedding because they're supposed to mate for life, supposedly, even though that's not true, but whatever. But what's interesting is on number 4 is a piece of clothing for men. That is a top knot cover. Yep, that little guy, maybe you can get closer. I've got to figure out a way to zoom in. There's got to be a way to zoom in. We just have to figure it out. There must be a way. Maybe if we connect it to the Bluetooth, we could actually do it. Anyway, that's a top knot cover. And, so men back then in Joseon had long hair, and they would be neatly kept up inside on a top knot, and the top knot would then be covered for extra neatness. Now, what's very interesting is that they've shown you a bridal ceremony. This is a wedding ceremony that is taking place there in that depiction. And that is an original late 18th century drawing depicting that. So this is a way that we can get an idea of how people dressed, at least in that era. And you can see the differences. Well, I can see the differences between how modern hanbok looks and hanbok then. There you can definitely see the waists are at the waist. The jeogori are actually pretty short, coming just to the ribs basically, but showing the white band that they wear around their waist. Yeah. And then we're getting into later and later. Yeah, miniature pottery, which was not children's toys. They find these in tombs. They're pretty certain they're votive in nature. This is a table that was used in the Joseon dynasty specifically for the ancestral rites, for the memorial service. So this is where those food stands of food would be placed with lots of offerings, and hypothetically it's for the spirit of the deceased to come and eat them, but they wouldn't just let it rot after they did the ceremony. Then that would be the feast, the post-ceremony feast. They didn't just throw food away like that. Definitely not in Joseon. That's a gorgeous painting. That is a painting of a shrine that dates to the mid-Joseon dynasty. So it's showing you the parts that we no longer see in shrines, which is you can see the fabric, you can see the draping of a curtain that would be there, but that's all rotted away these days. So you don't get to see that anymore in modern shrines. Oh, really beautiful. Okay, well, we are about to die, and by that I don't mean us, I mean our devices. So we'll walk you out, and on the way out, if there are any questions, now's your time to ask them. Tomorrow morning, I will bring you up to speed on what we're doing for the rest of the weekend. Oh, shoes. Sorry, one more thing. Shoes. So for those of you who are interested in footwear, remember those shoe soles we saw in the Sheila era stuff? These are 20th century straw shoes. Notice how similar they look. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to teleport over there and get back here so you can get a real side by side. But if you remember, so similar looking, right? That's what I meant by if it works, don't fix it. And then those next to them are mid-Joseon dynasty shoes, probably men's shoes.
Susan asks if the painting is on silk.
The painting is on, oh yes, it doesn't say, unfortunately, but usually it is on silk. Silk seems to be the traditional painting medium for Korean paintings. This is a party cup. So you see this little guy, that piece of celadon, right? There's a little spout in the middle of it, and basically, if you pour too much wine in, it's a trick cup. If you pour too much wine and you get overzealous in your drinking, their spout will actually allow it to drain out before it gets above a certain level, and you'll just spill wine all over yourself. So it's a fun party trick for those who know what's about to happen. Maybe not so fun for the person who doesn't understand what's about to befall them. But it's specifically to encourage modesty in the party culture that still persists to this day in Korea. Okay, well, are there any questions? A feast to celebrate the 60th wedding anniversary. Oh, wow. They're actually depicting so the 60th wedding, 60 is a pretty big deal in Joseon culture and traditional culture, 60th birthday or 60th anniversary. If you could make it to your 60th anniversary in Joseon, you were practically a god. And this actually depicts a genuine actual 60th anniversary that happened. They've kind of redrawn it a little bit, but not much.
The groom greets the bride.
Yeah, the groom greets the bride. So you can actually see what I was talking about the clothing, right? You can see the jeogori is long, and you can, but the waist, the skirts, the chima are definitely at waist level, right? Like mine. And, you know, you can see the various elements. So you can tell this is 18th century because of things like the wigs that are definitely not late Joseon in style. And also the full robes, the full sleeves.
Boisterous celebration.
Yeah.
There's the white band too.
Oh yeah, you can see the white band around the waist. Okay, well, final questions. I will tell you what's going on next. In about 18 hours, I guess, I'm going to be doing my weekly medieval sewing party. Join us. I'll be doing finger loop braiding. I'll be working on attaching lacing rings. I'll be talking about my fascinating recent learnings and just getting creative with all of you. And then on Sunday morning, my time here in Seoul, or Saturday evening or middle of the night, depending on where you are in the world, I'll be doing my collaboration with Philip from Irish Medieval History on a medieval Irish textiles and fashion recent learnings from a great new book I just purchased. So if you're interested in medieval Irish costume, definitely tune into that. And at some point this weekend, we will also be doing a couple of getting dressed videos, getting dressed medievally, European, not hanbok, and medieval dance videos. So like and subscribe if you're interested in any of that. If you're coming in from my travel channel, we've got more travel content coming your way. Okay, everyone. Any final questions, Handsome? Well then, everyone, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you can, put a comment under the video after it posts, even if it's just an emoji. If you have questions and I didn't answer them, put them in the comments and I will get to them. Otherwise, from our location in Daegu to your location throughout the world, may your adventures be creative and unexpected. Bye, everyone. Stay creative.